Hey everybody, Pastor Kevin Swann. We're back again with the fifth installment of I Am a Church Member Bible Study Series. Today we're in chapter 4. I will pray for my church leaders. Never before is it more important for church members to rally around and support church leadership. And I know that there are challenges in church leadership in different places, and sometimes pastor and people don't always get along. But by and large, I would like to believe that there are pastors out there who are trying to do God's will, trying to lead people in the things of God. And if anything, the church membership should pray for their church leader. So go ahead and download the Bible study sheet, read the chapter in the book. Once you've done that, let's go ahead and get started. I Am a Church Member, Part 5, Chapter 4, I will pray for my church
Let's
leader.
get started with I am a church member, and this is part 5 of our Bible study series. Again, as always, we want to give props and thanks to Tom Rainer, who is the author of the book, and a lot of what we discuss comes from the book, and certainly we don't want to slight him in any way, any copyright infringements, any of that stuff. We give credit, certainly where credit is due. Again, the goals for the study: we want to critically examine what it means to be a church member, not from our point of view, but from God's point of view. And oftentimes, we never consider God's point of view when we join a church. We mostly consider our own. 2, to generate ideas that will help all church members to become more engaged in the life of the church ministry. Now, I know people are busy. People have lives. If you got kids, they're involved in activities. If you're married, you got to spend time. Your job's working. All these kinds of things that can come up, plus your own personal interests, whatever organizations that you might be a part of. But really, God is calling every church member to be engaged in the life of the church. And the church actually could do so much more when people understand that principle alone, and then also to facilitate some discussion. So even though you're watching the video, if you're watching it with someone, there can be discussion and dialogue points throughout the video, or if you're watching it by yourself, you can stop the video, jot down some things, and really see what's going on. So those are the goals of this series. As a review, we did chapter 1 a few videos back, and it's really about secular membership and how most people approach church with the same mindset that you do about joining any other organization, whether it's a fraternity or sorority, a civic organization. And usually we become a part of those things because of the perks or the amenities that come along with it. The author mentioned a country club and some of the nice features of the country club that he joined, his family joined, while they were growing up, a nice pool and etc. And we oftentimes do the same thing. We look at what we can gain from membership as opposed to what we can do for the membership. And even then, that means that tithes and offerings are in many cases compared to dues, where as long as I pay something, I am, quote unquote, a member in good standing. And that's really not the perception or the mindset that God had for the church and for church members, that people should never think that just because you give whatever you give, that A, that entitles you to anything, and then B, it also means that now you are a member in good standing. You don't have to do anything else but simply to give money. And unfortunately, that has been a huge perception issue and a wrong one in the church. Chapter 2, we talked about the fact that we'll be a unifying church member, which means that God expects people to get along. Now, just to have to say that is interestingly enough, because the one place where people should want to come and feel good about being in a place ought to be the house of God. Jesus took this a step further when he said in John 13:35, "By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Not love, even love for me. He said, I want you to understand that the way the power of God is going to filter out is in how people treat each other. And it really doesn't make sense to have a believer to be nasty or rude to other people. That's not what God called. Unity, therefore, then becomes the most important aspect of the church, where we become connected together. And we can do great things when people of God put personal differences aside, traditional elements aside, and be willing to work for the benefit of the church. And the book describes two unity killers. One is gossip, because gossip smears people. It gets into the lives of people unfairly. It causes people to become guarded in church. It causes people to be afraid that once their information is out, that people are now going to start thinking of them negatively or on another light that they don't want. And so people will come to church very, very guarded, afraid even, simply because of gossip. They just don't want people to know their business. And if they do know their business, that they won't run it and tell it and share it with everybody in the church. Unforgiveness is the second one, where unfortunately many people are holding on to things for way too long, holding on to things that people have done in the church for years. And you can't have unity and you can't demonstrate love if you have hatred or unforgiveness in your heart. It just is not possible to do both. And so that was what chapter 2 mentioned. Church membership is about giving. And I know that most of the time when people talk about giving, you talk about money. But that's only one aspect of giving. You have to be giving of your time, giving of your talents for the kingdom of God, and certainly your treasure, forgiving others, and also sacrifice. So if you are a member of a church, if you are an Ivy member, or if you're a member of any church, the real questions you should be asking is this: in what ways, as a church member, have I demonstrated giving in my church? In what ways have I demonstrated forgiveness of the pastor, the church leader, another member, somebody else? Because if you've been a member of a church for any length of time, somebody at some point is going to tick you off. So how have you demonstrated forgiveness of others? And how, as a church member, have you demonstrated any level of sacrifice for the good of the ministry and for the kingdom of God? What have you not spent in order that you could give that money over to the church and to the kingdom of God? What have you said, you know what, I'm not going to be a part of this organization because I'm going to devote my time to the church? So church membership then really is about giving, forgiving, and sacrifice. Not the perks, not the traditions, not so the choir can sing my song and the preacher can preach what I want to hear. That's not what church membership is really all about. Last week, two videos ago we did, I will not let my church be about my preferences and desires. That while the church is the place where my spiritual needs should be met, it should first be the place where I come to serve. We should never want to join the church for personal gain, but we should join the church because we know where we fit. And truthfully speaking, some church members throw tantrums and fits just like little children. Why are church meetings so chaotic? Why are some church meetings you hear about so out of control? Because somebody stood up in the meeting and threw a fit and wanted to have their way and demanded certain things be happening. And if it didn't happen, then something else was going to take place. And then people lose control. That's childish. And that's childlike. And believers, especially adult believers, ought to be able to handle disagreements much better than that. So, when you join a church, you actually give up your preferences. You're there to serve, give, and sacrifice. And Jesus says that the greatest among us are the ones who serve. Not the one with the badge, not the one who sits on the front row, not the one who even preaches. The greatest in there is the one who serves. So, tonight we're about to get into chapter 4 of the book. I will pray for my church leaders. And I can't begin to emphasize, as a church leader, how important this is. So our opening discussion question is this: what do you believe are the overall perceptions that people have of pastors and church leaders, both good and bad? I want you to stop the video and I want you to write down your list. And if you're with someone, I want you to have some discussion. What do you think are some overall perceptions, generally speaking, not necessarily of me, but of all pastors and church leaders, both good and bad? All right, we're ready to move forward. Unfortunately, when I did this assignment to our Bible study group, the overwhelming thought negatively was that most pastors are out for money. But on a positive note, the pastors are anointed to preach and teach and all those things. But really, there's just this perception that the pastor is only out for your money. If that is the case, then that creates some level of mistrust. Understand what God has assigned to the pastor. You have to appreciate the position that God has created, which means that God established pastors to be caretakers over people's lives. Now, you may not like the person that's in the position, but you have to respect the position of the pastor because the position is what God assigned. And I know many people look at televangelists, they look at TV, they see people on TV, and sometimes even preachers can fall into this trap of looking at others whose ministries have prospered, and now all of a sudden our ministries become measured off of what we see on TV or whatever case might be. However, contrary to popular belief, being a pastor, while it is a wonderful experience, is also incredibly stressful, at times lonely. And the loneliness comes from the fact that God speaks the vision to the pastor, and the pastor has to speak the vision to the people. So that means by default, the only person who will really see all of the vision is the one who's the pastor, which means that others will see glimpses of it, but may never see it in its totality. That's a very lonely experience for a pastor. And then it's also very difficult to do. For anybody to do this for the sake of money only is absolutely, positively insane. Now, I know most people come to church and they look at what the pastor is wearing. They look at what the pastor is driving. They look at where the pastor may live, and they say, I want to be like that. But there is so much more to pastoring the right way that people miss. Now, granted, there are some bad apples in every bunch. There are bad pastors. There are some pastors who are money hungry. There are some pastors who are in it for fame and fortune, or whatever the case might be. But the truth of the matter is there are bad apples in every profession. There are bad cops. There are bad firefighters. They're bad whatever. And so you can't say that because you have a certain group that is not honorable, that everybody is in that category. What I do know is that in order to be an effective pastor, it requires you to be messy. Psalm 23 says, the Lord is my shepherd. And if you know anything about shepherding, you know that the shepherd's main responsibility is to care for the sheep. Now, sheep outside of the pack, it is easy for the wolves to get it. So you understand that sheep have to stay in the fold. Many times as pastor, while I look on Sunday mornings and I see that, bless the Lord, our Family Life Center is filled and we have great attendance, a lot of times when I go home, I'm not always calculating who is there. I'm more concerned about who was not there, because shepherds understand that when sheep are not connected to the fold, the wolves can come and get them. So pastoring is not glamorous. Pastoring is hard work, lots of prayer, lots of responsibility, lots of expectations, and it's difficult. If you don't believe me, I found this and I wanted to share this with you. 97% of pastors who were surveyed have been betrayed, falsely accused, or hurt by their trusted friends. 97% on some level have been hurt by those who are close to them. 70% of pastors battle depression. 7 out of 10 on some level. 7,000 churches close each year. 1,500 pastors quit the ministry each month. Period. I'm done. Don't want to do it. 10% of pastors, only 10, will retire as a pastor. Many others are bivocational and they have to do other things. 80% of pastors feel discouraged. 94% of pastors, families, feel the pressure of the ministry. 94% of pastors, families. It is not just the pastor that has to go through this, but it's the wife, it's the children, all of it that is a part of it. 78% of pastors have no close friends, nobody to really understand or deal. And you would like to think that pastors could lean on other pastors for support, but the truth of the matter is it doesn't always work that way. 90% of pastors report working 55 to 75 hours a week. And the reality is, even in my world, my phone starts ringing at 7 in the morning, and usually it ends at 11 o'clock at night. Constant, all day, every day. Now, I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm just simply sharing with you the realities of why it is important that you, in fact, pray for your pastor. In the chapter, and this is mine as well. This is not in the chapter, but these are my own experiences of what I think are the 5 greatest challenges of being a pastor and church leader. These are my own thoughts. One is a balance issue and lack of privacy. When is there family time versus ministry time? Because both expect you to be present. Lack of privacy means that for most people, you have some level of anonymity to your life, especially when things go wrong. The average church member, when their kids mess up, they have some level of anonymity. Pastors don't. When the average church member, when there's problems in marriage, there's certain levels of privacy you can maintain. Pastors don't have that. Everything that we do is done in public view. As a matter of fact, most of the good Sunday conversation around the dinner table is about what the pastor said that day or what the pastor done or something. So usually speaking, the pastor is in a fishbowl, and not only the pastor but the family as well. Number 2 is emotional swings, and people don't understand this, that you can be dealing with the death of someone 1 hour, and someone else calls you back the second hour and tell you that they got a new job or that the cancer results came back negative, and now you have to be excited. You can go from a low to a high to a low to a high all day long, and it wears on you emotionally. Number 3, you are expected to know everything in the Bible and to be everywhere all at the same time. So you're reading in Zephaniah, and you read the 3rd chapter of Zephaniah, and all of a sudden you expect the pastor to know everything in Zephaniah, but you hadn't read Zephaniah before that point. These are just some of the unfair expectations. Number 4, you have to love people as a pastor that you know don't like you. Now, the average church member just says, well, I don't have to put up with that person. I'll just sit somewhere else. I won't have to deal with you. But a pastor has to love everyone the same. And sometimes that means loving the people that are for you, some of the people that will run with you, and loving the people that can't stand your guts. Number 5, being blamed for things you don't even know about or didn't even do. And the blame is assigned to you because you are the leader. And whenever things go wrong, leadership is usually targeted for what did not happen. So these are 5 things that we see. So take some time now. I want you to read 1 Timothy chapter 3, and I want you to identify how many qualifications you see in verses 1 to 7 that there are of a church leader, a pastor, a bishop, an elder. Pause the video, go through them, and see what you come up with, and then we'll continue on. All right, hopefully by now you have identified the areas. Here we go. There are 16 that I counted, and some may have 17, some may have, just depending on the wording. But here are the ones that I have. And really the first one is the most important. It says that if somebody desires this office, it must be blameless. Blameless does not mean sin-free, but it does mean high character and integrity. And integrity is who you are when no one else is around. If you want to be called to this, you have to have a high moral character base. Who you are in the pulpit is the same person of who you are on Monday night. and there cannot be any differences in the two. And to be truthful, if you don't have this one, then the rest of them don't really matter, because integrity is the most important element of all of being a pastor bishop. Husband of one wife, faithfulness to the spouse, temperate, exhibiting self-control. Moses missed the promised land because he lacked self-control. He hit the rock when he wasn't supposed to. Water gushed out, but he did it because he was mad at the people. And God said, because I told you not to do it, the people are going to go in, but you're not. One act of a loss of self-control cost Moses entrance into the promised land. Sober-minded, being sensible, being even-keeled, not always getting too high, not always being too low, but being steady. Because in the church, there are always going to be things that are happening great. There are going to be some things that happen that are awful. And when things are awful, they need some measure of consistency that everything is going to be all right. Of good behavior, hospitable. The pastor ought to be kind to people. I mean, that shouldn't be too difficult. And even that goes for church leaders. You shouldn't have nasty church leaders. Church leaders ought to be kind. Able to teach, and this is the pastor. Feeding the sheep is one of the most important elements of the pastor. I know you can shout. I know you know how to close. But can you sit down and effectively teach me the things of God? That's significant. 8, not given to wine. That speaks for itself. Not violent. Again, speaks for itself. Not greedy for money. Not always doing it to get paid. But unfortunately, this is what a lot of people perceive pastors to be. Greedy. Gentle. Not quarrelsome. We're not going to be argumentative. We're not going to be going back and forth. We're not going to be acting crazy. Not covetous, greedy, or jealous of others. And unfortunately, this happens amongst ministers and pastors more than I care to share. That pastors genuinely can't be happy for another pastor because their own ministry isn't prospering the way they hope. It's sad, but it's true. One who rules his own house well. How can you rule in the house of God if your own house is messed up? It just don't go together. 15, not a novice. You're not new to this. You've been doing this for a while. I'm in my 17th year of ministry and have seen just about everything and experienced just about everything. But the most important one here is having a good testimony among unbelievers. So not only should the pastor have a good reputation in the church, but the pastor should also have a good reputation in the community, where even if those who don't go to church can look at the pastor and say the pastor ain't fake, the pastor is real and serious about doing ministry. Even if I don't go to church, I can see that that's something that's important to the pastor, that they see the salt and light, even if they don't worship God. Unbelievers can tell who's real and who's not. And here's the most important thing. The verse 7 says that these things are done because the enemy, so we won't be a reproach and a snare to the enemy's traps. In other words, Satan has a hit out on every pastor. There are traps that are set. Money traps, women traps, men traps, power traps, fame traps that are all set for the pastor by the enemy, with the hope that if the pastor walks into one of those, it will take and discredit the ministry, take the pastor down, destroy that pastor's reputation, and also put a stain on the church, because nobody wants to go to a church where the pastor's reputation is bad. So this is why you got to pray for the pastors. If you're a member of Ivy, please pray for me. I will accept all prayers that you pray. Don't allow the enemy to get the best of pastor. Keep his mind, keep his heart, bless his family. And so these are the things that are important. So when you pray, pray for the pastor, church leader, and their families. Pray for their marriages. Pray for their children. Pray for blessings in the home. Pray for the pastor and church leader's protection. Keep the pastor from hurt, harm, and danger. Then number 3, pray for the pastor and leader's physical and mental health. All of these things are significant and important as far as ministry is concerned. Now, the last piece is, if you turn in your book to page 52, here is the pledge. I want you to sign that, but we're going to go over it together. Let's read it together on the screen. I will pray for my pastor and his family every day. I understand that the pastor's work is never ending. His days are filled with numerous demands that bring emotional highs and lows. He must deal with critics. He must be a good husband and father. Because my pastor cannot do all things in his own power, I will pray for his strength and wisdom daily. Please pray for that. Because the enemy knows if you take out the head, the body will wither. Next time, we'll look at chapter 5. I will lead my family to be healthy church members. I hope you have enjoyed this Bible study today. Fantastic on the life of the pastor and the ministry and the struggles and the private pains that pastors must endure. If you do nothing else, please pray for your pastor. God bless you. And not just the pastors. Pray for their families. Pray for church leadership, deacons, deaconess, trustees, department leaders, anybody that's a church leader. Pray for all who are in ministry. Thank you so much.
These statistics that are shared in this video are alarming, and they are in fact truthful. While we can sometimes look at and see people on TV and ministries that are blossoming and prospering in these massive buildings, the truth of the matter is most pastors don't minister in that kind of way. Many pastors are struggling, hurting personally and in ministry. And if anything, the best thing that you can do is simply to pray for your church leader. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be doing another video. Stay tuned for the next one to come in chapter 5. And until then, be blessed and be a blessing to someone else. Take care.